Good evening. I call to order this February 5th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Larson.
Present.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Bessie. Councilmember Montgomery.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Here.
Councilmember Adams.
Here.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Thank you very much. Would you please join the City Council with me in a moment of silence? Thank you, and would you join the City Council with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our Sergeant at Arms tonight is Lieutenant Vince Rega. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. Call on the city manager. We have a new senior staff person with the city, and I'd like for you to introduce her, please.
Thank you, Mayor Jones, members of the City Council. I'm pleased tonight. I'm going to ask her to come up. Tasha Logan Ford just started as an assistant city manager this week. Tasha, want to come up to the mic for a second and just say hello to everybody? You will all get a chance to meet her in more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Mayor Jones, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, and members of the council, I'm excited to be part of the team here in Winston-Salem. Today is my first day in the office and have had a chance to go around and start to get acclimated with staff. I did plan my move in the middle of the snow that we had last week, so we are still unpacking some boxes, but so far Winston-Salem has been good for me and my family, and I'm looking forward to working with each one of you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would not let you leave without saying this.
Yes, ma'am.
I went to Elizabeth City, and I met many, many fine people from Rocky Mount.
Wonderful.
My dear friend, Mayor Pro Tem Helen Gay,
Yes, ma'am.
very fine.
Yes, and Mrs. Julia Congleton Bryant, also in Rocky Mount, has asked me to make sure I say hello to you for her.
Right? We know them. Thank you.
Very well.
One of your Deltas.
The mayor of Rocky Mount is not happy with me for.
You got a couple.
We're glad.
He'll forgive you.
Fire chief as
What
well.
about Attorney Lamont Wiggins?
Absolutely. He has made sure that I had to leave my cell phone because as he's planning his wedding, he and his fiance are looking at the same place where my husband and I got married in Benson. So I'm texting him to make sure that he gets that one on right too with her. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank each one of you.
Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's agenda of the City Council is comprised of the following items. We have 2 UDO text amendments. There's an item concerning the City Council's meeting schedule. There's an item making recommendations for board and commissions. The 2 UDO text amendments are public hearings, and when the public hearings are called, persons in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak. If no one wishes to speak, the public hearings will be closed and the City Council will consider the item. We're televising this meeting live tonight on TV 13. And it will be replayed tomorrow, Tuesday at 9 a.m., and again Wednesday at 9 p.m. Of course, copies of our agenda as well as videos of previous meetings are always available on our city's website, and you just select the Watch the Meetings online option. May we have item number 1, please?
Item Z1, public hearing on ordinance amending the secondary dwelling regulations to allow previously approved special use permits to be heard by the Zoning Board of Adjustment, UDO 285, proposed by Planning and Development Services, recommended by the Planning Board.
That's our Planning Director, Mr. Norby, to give us just a brief preview of what this item is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. Good evening. This request is to revise our regulations for existing accessory dwellings that the council recently amended in the fall. In 2017, the council adopted revised regulations for accessory dwellings with UDO 267. So previously, detached accessory units were permitted through the Board of Adjustment special use permit process. Most special use permits include a expiration date after which a unit would be allowed if its permit was reviewed. So someone would have to come right back through the Board of Adjustment and have a hearing and signs posted on the property to give residents in the area a chance to have input in it, and the Board of Adjustment would decide whether to renew the permit or not. UDO 267, as it was adopted in September, requires all new accessory dwellings, even attached as well as detached, to be approved by City Council through special use district rezoning. The language that Council approved for the new ADUs did not address existing previously approved units that were approved by the Board of Adjustment with expiring permits. So without wording being clarified, the effect of this would be for the owners of these units to have to apply for rezoning from Council to get a permanent status, which, as you know, the rezoning process can be, for an individual homeowner, could be expensive as well as difficult sometimes. This amendment would allow existing accessory dwelling units that have been previously approved with expiring terms to continue being reviewed and approved by the Board of Adjustment rather than the City Council. There are 64 existing units that have been approved by the Board of Adjustment with permit expiration dates that have yet to pass, which could take advantage of this amendment. And to protect neighborhoods, this amendment also allows the Board of Adjustment to grant renewal terms of no more than 10 years. So we wouldn't be substituting the Board of Adjustment giving permanent status, which can only be given by the City Council through a rezoning action. This gives neighbors an opportunity to periodically testify on the upkeep and impact of the units through the public hearing process. And if a unit no longer meets its conditions of approval, the Board of Adjustment could deny renewal of the special use permit, and the unit would then become illegal, and units with lapsed permits would also become illegal, and inspections could take enforcement action on it. So this text amendment was actually discussed originally with the Community Development Housing General Government Committee, and the committee agreed that that was not an intended consequence of the amendment, so asked us to initiate this process through the City Council, through the Planning Board, and the Planning Board reviewed it on January 11th and recommended approval, and it is in front of you this evening.
Any questions, Mr. Norby, before we go to public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Norby. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who would like to speak on this proposed UDO text amendment? All right. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And what's the pleasure of council?
I'll move approval.
Second. Okay. Motion and second. You get the. Yeah, there's a wording here on there.
I'm sorry.
We'll let Councilmember Montgomery, if he would, enter that into the record.
Officially.
I move approval of 1 UDO 285 to amend the secondary dwelling regulations and 2 the statement of consistency for said item.
Thank you.
Oh, Jeff.
All right. So the official record will show that Mr. Clark moved and seconded by Mr. McIntosh. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like the record to reflect that I voted in favor.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I am not coming up on the computer yet.
Okay, let's hang up. Everybody join the meeting.
I'm drawing, but it's not. Got it.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Now we have item Z2.
Item Z2, public hearing on ordinance revising Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to further restrict limited campus uses in residential zoning, UDO 281, proposed by Planning and Development Services, Community Development Housing and General Government Committee. Forwarded this item to council with 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining.
Before we move into public hearing, I believe Tiffany White is going to make the presentation on this. Ms. White, please.
Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, council members, good evening.
Good evening.
This is a brief overview of UDO 281. The petitioner is Planning and Development Services staff, and it's a request to amend the UDO to further restrict limited campus uses in residential zoning. Some quick background. Limited campus use provisions allow campus-zoned institutions to establish multifamily or office uses within 500 feet of the C-zoned property. The limited campus use provisions have been in the UDO since the adoption of the UDO to allow institutions to have some expansion ability while protecting neighborhood character. Prior to UDO adoption, most institutions could locate in residential zoning without any restrictions. Current use conditions for the limited campus uses require scale and massing consistent with the neighborhood, parking behind the building, location on a major or minor thoroughfare, and a type 1 buffer yard, and there are impervious surface requirements as well. Limited campus use proposals are reviewed by the planning board without a public hearing. After a May 2017 zoning case involving Baptist Medical Center, City Council asked staff to prepare a UDO amendment that would further restrict limited campus uses in residential areas. Staff proposed a change of the review authority for limited campus uses in residential areas from the planning board to the elected body utilizing the special use permit process. Staff solicited comment and held a meeting about the proposed changes, and we asked stakeholders to attend, including the C-zoned institutions, various neighborhood associations, and the Neighborhood Alliance. Concerns were expressed from all sides about the special use permit process, and so as a result of that, Wake Forest University consulted with the other C-zoned institutions and proposed alternate language for UDO 281. Their proposal retains the existing planning board review authority. Limited campus uses would not be allowed adjacent to campus districts with limited or special use zoning, so the CL or CS zone properties. For general campus zone properties, the area eligible for limited campus uses would be reduced to the properties adjacent to the campus zone property defined as sharing a property line or immediately across the street from the campus zone parcel. It maintains the current condition that limited campus use structure must be within 500 feet of the campus zoning, even if it's on an adjacent parcel. We held a public hearing on November 9th, and the planning board discussed both the initial staff recommendation and the Wake Forest proposal, and ultimately recommended the Wake Forest proposal to the elected bodies. This amendment will allow neighborhood institutions to continue growing in place while adding further restrictions on potential expansions. And on January 9th, the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee recommended the Wake Forest University proposal to the full City Council. I have some additional slides here. This first slide shows where these campus zone properties are in Forsyth County. There are 8 within the city limits and 1 in the county. Additionally, staff did some further mapping to help council understand the impacts of the proposed ordinance. You should have received these in your packet. The large shaded area in the center, this happens to be Baptist Hospital. The kind of purple-pink color to the side is that 2017 CL district that was added. And the brown line around is the 500-foot buffer. And the shaded parcels are those existing limited campus use potential sites. With the proposed limited campus use in UDO 281, that radius would be reduced, brought in to the blue line. So only the shaded parcels inside the blue line would now be available for limited campus uses. And I have these same types of maps on all of the campus parcels. This is Forsyth Hospital. This is Wake Forest University. UNC School of the Arts. Forsyth Tech. The Children's Home. Winston-Salem State. Salem College. And this is the county property, Center Grove Baptist Church.
Any questions, Ms. White? Thank you very much. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who would like to be heard on this proposed UDO text amendment? Mr. Morgan, please. If you would state your name and address for the record and limit your comments for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Reed Morgan, 1834 Wake Forest Road is my address. I'll be brief, as I think it's been well described by our staff here. It's been in existence since 1995. It was a compromise from when the colleges and universities and other campus type uses were permitted in residential zones per se. And it was a transitional type use that recognized that some kind of use near the campus was still appropriate. It's not been abused, and the reason we're here today is not because of a problem with it, but because of an issue about its potential unwanted expansion. The solution to this in the current text amendment is to permit limited campus use only in the general use zone, which would be the traditional boundaries normally of a campus type site. Rezoning to add to the site would normally be a C or an S or an L zone with a site plan attached. So it is under the control of the rezoning process here to allow this further. In addition, you could see the areas that were eliminated as possible limited campus use sites on those maps. That's pretty significant. It looked like, I don't know what the percentage would be, but 75% maybe, has been eliminated from the current ordinance as potential limited campus use sites. So that would seem to be a decent compromise, I think, from our standpoint. You also have in your folder something indicating an email that Winston-Salem State is in favor of this, and we also have information that Forsyth Tech is in support, and the UNC School of the Arts has said it does not oppose it. We believe the compromise is reasonable, especially in light of the fact that the matter did not arise from a problem with the limited campus use. We feel like the process has worked well, and we appreciate the efforts on this by everyone involved, including the neighborhood representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Any questions, Mr. Morgan? Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Anyone else like to be heard? All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Councilmember Montgomery, this did come out of your committee. Are you prepared to make a motion, please?
I'm prepared and follow a comment.
Yes, absolutely.
I move for approval of 1 UDO 281 to further restrict limited campus uses in residential zoning districts, and 2, the statement of consistency for said item.
Second.
Motion and second. Councilmember Montgomery, if you go ahead.
My comment here in reference to this item, as we discussed it in the General Government Committee, there was dialogue in reference to that went beyond the original scope of the review that the council asked the planning board to take into consideration. But I thought that it was a good conversation, in particular the conversation around notification to neighborhoods and communities and the impact of such a transition if a campus use decided to expand. How does the community, how are they engaged in that process as it would rest with the planning board as opposed to that being a council review and a council conversation? If you review the documents, the original staff recommendation had something that came through the council, but it was through the special use permitting process, which still would not give the community the full opportunity to engage in the dialogue and the conversation. As was the, I believe, Neighborhood Alliance recommendation also had a special use permit requirement, which again would not allow for full citizen engagement. Allowing it to go through the planning board process would allow for more community engagement. And the only thing that I would request from this council, and I don't know if it requires an addendum to the actual UDO itself, but something that required, it's something we already get information now, but something that required the planning board or planning staff to alert a council member of a particular ward of the action that's being taken place, particularly in terms of so that that council person can then engage the community around it if they want to engage at the planning board level. But I think that this is the least intrusive way for the community to engage rather than using the special use permit process for this. And again, that was not the initial conversation that came through this process, but it was a good question I thought that came up. And that was one of the reasons why I did not vote in favor of it as it came out of the committee, but abstained, because I thought that it was a good conversation that we needed to find some more answers to. And for me, it's making sure and requiring in some factor that a council person in the area of this request is required to be informed. Even though we get updates monthly around the rezonings, there's nothing that requires us to be notified.
I assume, Mr. Norby or the city manager, we could add that into our standard operating procedures to staff without making that part of the ordinance.
We could do it informally. To mandate it would require a text amendment, but I think we could do that informally.
You want to give that a... Mr. Bessie.
Yes, thank you. I think Councilmember Montgomery gave a good summary of the conversation at committee, and staff has given a good summary of the proposal and what it would do. Just a little bit of background for folks who weren't tracking this last year. The review initially arose out of a case in which Wake Forest Baptist was looking for an expansion of campus use adjacent to the existing campus. And the question, a very reasonable one, was raised at the time: would that necessarily also expand the off-campus zone that could be affected by the accessory uses? Since the answer appeared to be yes, we needed to find a workaround in that case to address neighborhood concerns. We were able to find a workaround in that particular case, and in essence, what the planning board has settled on and recommends to us here is in effect what we did in that case formalized. Essentially, a C limited or a C special doesn't expand the off-campus use boundary. And so this, in my opinion, fully addresses the concern that I asked be looked at that time without the necessity of expanding the special use permit process, which, quite frankly, when it comes before the council, nobody really finds fully satisfactory. So I recommend this.
Very good. Thank you. We do have a motion and a second. Oh, excuse me, Councilman Larson.
I've been troubled by this particular component of our UDO, what I consider sort of a stealth zoning provision. It creates a area that's within 500 feet basically of a major campus, and it allows them to, the universities, campuses, to expand without a rezoning process and with no notification and without any public review. This proposal addresses many of my concerns. If you look at the maps, you see that it provides clarity to the residents and to the neighborhood as to what is actually being impacted by this particular element in our UDO. It gives the universities some flexibility in how they operate. It is highly constricted because it involves only the C zoning and not CS or CL zoning categories. So, in fact, it limits it basically to those primary campuses. The main concern that remains with myself is that under these provisions, it goes back to the planning board rather than the city council, who has a direct impact. All these campuses basically fall within the city limits, and council is basically not involved except through the planning board. This issue, if it has to come to us based on a quasi-judicial process, which I'm informed by staff is the only way we could insert ourselves in it. We're familiar with the quasi-judicial process and what it means from cell towers and how meaningless in many ways it is to allow real meaningful public input. As I understand it, and maybe Paul Norby can answer this for me, that the standards and criteria that would have to be used in that public, quasi-public process of review for appropriateness or impact are the same standards that are listed. That is, parking in the back, architectural guidelines as to how big the building is, square footages for occupancy. Those standards would be the same standards we would have to impose if we were using it on a quasi-judicial basis, which of course I assume then be the standards that staff would use for recommending to the planning board. Is that how that would work at this point?
Yes. Councilmember Larson, the present ordinance as well as the proposed new ordinance spells out, the present ordinance actually spells out 8 criteria that have to be reviewed by staff and by the approving body when it comes in. That it's consistent with the neighborhood, it's a scale and massing consistent with structures in the neighborhood. If it's a new building, or it needs to be an existing building, it must meet dimensional requirements of the underlying single-family residential district. There's a limitation if there's student housing as to how much and how dense it could be. Impervious surface cover, there's limitations there. It's proximity to campus district, in this case a significant reduction from the original text that is in the ordinance now. The access having to be on land immediately adjacent to the campus zone property or across the street. And buffer yards, type 1 buffer yards, and off-street parking will be at the rear of the structure. So those are significant things that would apply regardless of whether it goes to the planning board for final approval or to the city council for final approval.
Right. Thank you. So I will be supporting this. I would agree with my colleague, Councilmember Montgomery, that the only thing that also bothers me is the question of transparency, in the sense of, do you know what's happening next door to you? And in these cases where you have residents, people that have bought houses that happen to be in this little zones that are still in place, are they informed, for example, that they are living in a zone that could in fact eventually accommodate a college function, such as a housing unit or an administrative space? And the way it's set up right now, there does not seem to really be that procedure, and I suspect that we'll see that if staff will bring back to us some method of notifying people what's happening in their neighborhoods. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We do have a motion and a second. Would you please indicate your preference by voting yes if you're in favor and no if you're against this? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item Z3.
Item Z3, consideration of City Council's February meeting schedule.
Customers, we're suggesting establishing another committee of the whole on February 25th to continue our discussions about the proposed or potential bond issue. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Taylor, Councilmember McIntosh, seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, please vote no. Councilmember Best.
Just for clarification, this is the 26th, as I understand.
26th.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Going through that.
Are you going out of town?
Are you in town, Mr. Best?
Last time we debated what was the fifth.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item Z4.
Item Z4, Mayor joins recommendation for appointments to the MWBE Advisory Committee. Stephen Hemrick, Construction Law Category, appointment, term expiring February 2021. And Jonathan Gerstmeyer, Construction Category, appointment, term expiring February 2021.
Is there a motion? Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Adams, second by Councilmember Montgomery. Any discussion?
I would like to say
Councilmember Burke.
the president, chairman of this MWBE, Ms. Allen, is doing a very good job, and she's very conscientious, and I want us to know that, her to know how we appreciate her.
Here.
Thank you, Councilmember Burke. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, please indicate by voting no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Council members, we do have a need to go into closed session, and I recognize Councilmember Taylor for a motion. Councilmember Best, did you have an item?
Yes. Did we vote on both of the nominations?
Yes, my understanding the motion was for both of them. Yes, sir. Councilmember Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, members of the community. We do have a need to go into closed session to discuss a number of items. So I move that the Winston-Salem City Council go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318, 11A, 3, 4, and 5. 1, to discuss the settlement of a claim and protect the attorney-client privilege. 2, to discuss the location or expansion of an industry or business within the city. And 3, to provide instructions to city staff regarding the acquisition of real property located at 3102 Sides Road and currently owned by Helen and Walter Wilson, and real property located at 0 Peters Creek Parkway, currently owned by Elsie Kinney for public safety purposes.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. We'll go into closed session. Thank you.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Taylor, second by Councilmember Adams to end closed session. All in favor of ending closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. We're out of closed session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Adams, seconded by several people. Councilmember McIntosh. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. We are adjourned.
Oh, I think we are.